President, I seek leave to make a brief explanation before addressing a question without notice for the Minister representing the Premier on the topic of international students.
There's leave granted. Leave is granted on Mr Sims.
Thank you. Before the pandemic, international students were a big export earner for South Australia, bringing in more than $2 billion a year, creating jobs in our local economy and helping our accommodation, hospitality and tourism industries. Last November, South Australia was given approval to pilot bringing back 300 students, but that trial has since stalled. Now the New South Wales Government have announced their plan to bring international students back to university campuses this year, which is now under consideration of the federal government. My question to the Treasurer is, with our international borders expected to remain closed until mid-2022 and no additional funding for our universities, where is the state government's plan to bring international students back to the state up to?
The Treasurer has the call. Look, I heard most of the Honourable Mr Sims's question, but there was some interjection happening on my left, and I'd like to hear the Treasurer's answer. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr President. I'd like to hear it too. Mr President, on behalf of the Premier, I know he would welcome the honourable member's question and his interest in this particular area. This is a particular passion of the Premier and indeed the government. He has been working actively with the Minister for Health, the Minister for Industry and Trade and their respective officers in relation to this issue. You can rest assured that the Premier and the responsible ministers and officers have active proposals before the Commonwealth Government for their consideration, but it does require approval of the Commonwealth Government. And it's not just the New South Wales Government that's interested in this area. The Board of Treasurers discussions I've had over recent months indicate that certainly First Minister or Chief Minister Andrew Barr from the ACT has been actively engaged in this space, as has the New South Wales Government, as has the South Australian Government. So there are a number of jurisdictions who have varying proposals, varying nature and complexions before the Commonwealth Government, but ultimately it does require the agreement of the Commonwealth Government in relation to these issues. We're not able to take these decisions as sovereign nations of ourselves, because we're not a sovereign nation in South Australia. We're part of the Commonwealth, and clearly the federal government has the major say in relation to this. So I know that the Minister for Health and his officers, as I said, have been actively engaged. We do have, in our view, a viable proposition awaiting approval, and we'll have to sit back, work together cooperatively with the Commonwealth Government, as some of the other jurisdictions are, to see whether we can get an early response from the Commonwealth Government. We're certainly very hopeful that it will be much, much sooner than the middle of next year that the honourable member has raised, which is the general federal budget assumption about the opening up of borders more broadly, the attraction of international students in pilot programs, specially controlled, monitored, etc., with all the sort of rigorous controls that Australians and South Australians would want to ensure the safety of South Australians in relation to this program. But the member is right. There is a genuine passion from the Premier. He recognises, as the member does, that international students and international education are an important part of our universities' financial experience, our state's export performance, but it's also our state's future attractiveness in terms of hoping to keep some of these young students on, or with an ongoing interest in what occurs here in South Australia. So it's a win-win from the state's viewpoint, and the Premier and the Government are actively engaged.
Mr Sims, as a supplementary.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. Whilst these discussions are ensuing between the state and federal government, will the state government commit to providing our higher education institutions with a lifeline to ensure that there are no further staff cuts or potential campus closures?
Treasurer.
Mr President, that's where we might diverge. The answer is no. Mr President, I've had that discussion with the Vice-Chancellors and the universities, and they have very strong balance sheets. The honourable member is probably familiar with some of our universities. They have strong balance sheets, considerable assets, and yes, they have faced challenges to varying degrees, but I would invite the honourable member to look at the recent financial report of one of our 3 universities, Mr President, which indicated that they, contrary to their early expectations, had emerged in a relatively strong financial position. Mr President. As I said to one of the Vice-Chancellors, their balance sheet was very attractive to the State Treasurer. We envied the fact that they weren't running deficits and debt levels at the size that the state was having to run to try and save jobs, save businesses and to help households. Now, I made that comment half in jest, tongue-in-cheek, but nevertheless the answer to the honourable member's question is the same that I gave to the universities on behalf of the government, that we weren't going to help them out. I hasten to say that we did provide emergency assistance during the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic last year via my colleague, the Minister for Human Services, in terms of emergency assistance. My recollection was we provided a financial package of around about $13 million, not to bail out the universities, but to actually use them as a mechanism to provide assistance, or some of that money, I think it was 10 of the 13 million, to use them as a mechanism to provide assistance to students who were struggling for either food, basic needs, emergency assistance during the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mr Sims.
Thank you, Mr President. If the balance sheets of these universities are so spectacular, could the Treasurer shed any light on why our South Australian universities might be laying off staff?
I just remind the Honourable Mr Sims that the supplementary needs to refer to the original answer, and I don't think the balance sheet reference was in the original answer, but I'll ask the Treasurer to respond.
Happy to have another conversation which is consistent with the standing orders, Mr President, with the honourable member after question time. But look, the reality is universities have to take decisions. Some of them may well be related to COVID. In many respects they may not be related to COVID. But whatever decisions that the universities have taken, they are significantly less than they were contemplating through the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic last year. But running universities, big institutions, there are always challenges in relation to how they manage their budgets. But, Mr President, they are in a relatively very healthy position given the strength of their balance sheets.
The Honourable Mr